Homeward, Michael Dorn desperately asks for just one episode where he doesn't have to sit in the makeup chair for 4 hours.
He's still got makeup on his nose, though.
Yeah, it doesn't take 4 hours.
Alright, I guess.
Probably just took 3.5.
The Enterprise heads to Baral 2 to answer a distress call from Nikolai Rozhenko, Worf's foster brother.
So just like Data, we're choosing to introduce all of this extended family in the second half of the last season of this show. Nikolai is on the planet as a cultural observer, so the same deal as Who Watches the Watchers.
Data says intense plasmonic reactions are destroying the atmosphere and that the planet will be uninhabitable in less than 38 hours. But he also says the atmosphere is dissipating, so which is it?
When Riker asks why Nikolai would have waited pretty much until it was already too late to send out a distress call, Data throws out some bullshit explanation that events just happen, they happen fast, and there's no reason. So basically, because the writers are lazy.
The ship rocks, which Data says is caused by energy bursts from the planet, and when Riker asks if there is any danger, Data says no, but then immediately says they may experience system failures and power surges.
But not in the important parts of the ship, where the main cast is. They haven't been able to contact Nikolai. Worf says his observation post seems okay, but there's no life signs inside. And Riker says it's not like Nikolai to leave his post, because we're all so familiar with this man.
And from what we'll learn about him later, it doesn't seem out of the question that he would leave his post.
Right.
Worf picks up evidence of a deflection shield at a cave, and Picard gives him permission to beam down.
But they all must obey the Prime Directive. So I knew this episode was going to be great.
And Worf is going to have to be surgically altered to pass as a Baralan. I know they've done that before, but it will never not be ridiculous.
Beverly, with her keen sense of observation, notes that Worf is worried about Nikolai since they're related. So now we're starting a brand new character arc where Beverly is telepathic? Come on!
Worf says that Nikolai left the Academy after a year because he couldn't follow the rules, but he is a natural leader.
So it actually sounds like he would have been a model officer, because none of them follow the rules, and they're always rewarded for it.
And when Beverly says she's looking forward to meeting Nikolai, Worf's reaction was great. Worf beams down into the cave in his Renaissance Fair costume.
Apparently right next to 2 guys. And when they start questioning him, it turns out he didn't just beam down next to 2 guys, but like 12 guys, including Nikolai, who Worf is shocked to find hanging around with the Barallans.
Nikolai is played by Paul Sorvino, who is best known for appearing in the art film The Stuff.
The art film.
Which we've covered on our channel before.
I also recognized him from Goodfellas.
Nikolai tells Worf the others think he is a Baralan from a distant village, and he tells them that Worf is a seer who can determine a safe course to travel through the storms on the surface.
Nikolai tells Worf that when he sent the distress call, he knew the Enterprise was close by, and he's glad that they sent down Worf.
They head up to the Enterprise, where Picard asks Nikolai why he interfered with the people even if he knew the atmospheric dispersion couldn't be stopped.
Nikolai says he wants to create an atmospheric shield around part of the planet to save one village. And naturally, we see Beverly silently nodding in agreement, as Picard gives Nikolai a firm no, citing the Prime Directive.
But Nikolai says the real point was to let cultures evolve, and they can't do that if they get destroyed.
And we get a bunch of discussions we've seen in many episodes in the past, all about the Prime Directive.
And at one point, Beverly says that they are interfering even by not taking action, which could not possibly be more incorrect.
And they ultimately say they are not going to help the Barallans.
Picard forcefully shuts Nikolai down and says he won't even be allowed to go down to retrieve his stuff.
But he can use the ship's computer to get his records via the space internet.
When Picard walks out, I was surprised that Beverly didn't try to talk him down.
After everyone leaves, Worf apologizes and says he wishes there was another way.
When Nikolai retrieves his data, he asks Picard for permission to upload it to the ship's computer.
And Picard says, yeah, what the f***? Why are you asking me something like that? Just do it.
Yeah, it was very obvious when they focused on Nikolai asking for permission that something else was up. Meanwhile, Data describes in detail how the planet's atmosphere is being destroyed. And as if that wasn't enough, Picard tells him to put it on screen.
And tells Data to tune in on all the villagers' screams as they die a painful and horrible death.
Completely ignoring Nikolai's feelings about the whole situation. The image starts faltering, and Data says he adjusted for interference, but he does it again. I wonder if Nikolai uploaded anything other than what he said he was going to.
Picard launches into eulogy mode and starts spewing out a bunch of bullshit about the Prime Directive, while Nikolai leaves the bridge in tears.
When Picard also leaves and Riker gives a course order, they start experiencing a power drain. Worf says it's coming from Deck 10, so he takes a security team to check it out.
He finds it's coming from one of the holodecks, but it won't open, even for his override commands. But then it opens on its own, and Worf hears someone beckoning him in, and just chooses to follow a weird voice, beckoning him into a holodeck that wasn't obeying his commands.
He finds Nikolai in a simulated cave, pressing some buttons and showing Worf that the Barallans are behind a wall. He explains that he blocked the Enterprise sensors when he beamed them up, which still doesn't explain how he beamed them up, but okay.
And he says he's been planning to do all of this for days, and he transported the villagers while they were sleeping.
Yeah, it's a good thing none of them happened to wake up, or, get up to go to the bathroom or something.
Worf is irate, saying Nikolai had a duty to uphold the Prime Directive.
Picard berates Nikolai, but Nikolai says he has a plan to take the Barallans to a new planet and simulate the journey in the holodeck as if they are walking there, and then beam them to a location that they would have already recreated in the holodeck. Picard
thinks about it, but then asks, what if it doesn't work, and the Barallans discover what has really happened. And Nikolai responds that's why he chose the Enterprise specifically, because they f*** up every week. But things always work out by the end of the episode.
And all I could think about was that regardless of any jokes we've made in the past about bodily fluids in the holodeck, this is a situation where these people would not know that they are not in an actual cave, so they would be pissing and shitting without a second thought. And even if they're traveling long distances in a simulation, they're not actually moving that far, so would the smell of their excrement just keep building up more and more?
Picard says because they don't have another option, even though they do, they could just kill them. They'll have to try it.
Beverly says there are countless planets in Federation space that could support the Barallans, but Picard and Data immediately say they may not find a suitable one. How about one of those countless ones that Beverly just mentioned?
Geordi says the holodeck simulation won't keep running for long because the writers decided they need some other bullshit reason to keep things moving. And the interference from the planet that they left hours, days, weeks ago is apparently still messing with the ship systems. And apparently they didn't know about it until now.
And Geordi says the only way to fix it is to shut down all the holodecks and reinitialize the entire system. Picard says that would take hours, and Nikolai says they have to hope the system works until then.
Why don't they just knock these people out with sleep gas or something? Nikolai says he'll return to the holodeck, and Picard dictates that Worf go too, to keep an eye on him.
Nikolai tells the Barallans that the village was destroyed, and Worf can guide them to a new safe place.
When questioned with logical questions, both Nikolai and Worf don't actually provide any answers and just say to trust them.
But luckily they are interrupted by a woman screaming. It turns out she has noticed that the holodeck is beginning to falter.
So it's in a pool of water. What happened if someone tried to drink that water? Would it actually make someone feel like they were quenching their thirst? Or what if they touched it? Would they get wet? And what would happen if they got wet from that water and then left the holodeck? Would they immediately become dry?
I'm just imagining, what if somebody's just sitting on top of a rock and the rock disappears, but then it reappears when they're under the rock?
I don't understand this piece of technology.
Neither do the writers. Worf tells them not to worry because this is the sign of LaForge, an omen indicating that the road ahead will be full of good fortune.
Nikolai praises Worf's lying skills, but Worf says Nikolai hasn't changed and expects people to solve the problems that he creates.
And Nikolai says he doesn't care if Worf is upset, he's trying to save people.
During their search, Data has found 2 suitable planets for the Barallans. One has Cardassians crawling all over it, and the other one doesn't. And Beverly, using her keen powers of observation, says the second one sounds like a better choice. Then she launches into postulation mode, asking questions about things that they have no control over, which Data basically tells her, trying not to roll his eyes while doing so.
Worf talks to a Barallan who is writing down their chronicle, and he shows Worf how he is adding him and Nikolai to his hieroglyphics.
Is it hieroglyphics or hieroglyphs?
Good question. Just leave me out then. I don't know.
The dude finds that he lost one of his scrolls and says he'll have to go back for it.
Worf tries to dissuade him, but the Barallan says it is the life of the village.
And instead of retrieving it himself, for some reason Worf lets this dude go off on his own in a malfunctioning holodeck.
An old Barallan comes up to Worf and asks for help carrying his crap, and he points out his daughter, Tyrannosaurus, or whatever her name was, and says he would like her to be Worf's wife if he doesn't make it to their new home, but Worf promises he will make it.
because the holodeck can also recreate people, so if the guy actually dies, they'll just make a holodeck version of him.
The Baralan who went looking for the scroll finds it, but he also sees a holodeck cave wall completely disappear.
Insert gasp of surprise.
And he walks out. He encounters an unusually high number of people wandering the halls, and none of them recognize him as a Baralan, showing that Picard must have been trying to keep it a secret that he has been violating the Prime Directive.
The guy ends up in 10 Forward, where Riker and Troy see the rest of the crew advancing on this dude like zombies, which would freak anybody out.
Troy tells him that they are friends of Nikolai and Worf and will not hurt him.
Beverly answers my immediate next question of why they don't just erase this guy's short-term memory, like they've done in the past, by saying his brain is weird.
Picard talks to the guy, who says his name is Vorin, and explains what's going on. He tells them their world is gone, but they can take them to a new one where they can survive and grow. But Vorin says,
"How can we grow when everything that made us who we are is gone?"
It was really cheesy.
Back in the holodeck, the Baralans have made it to the surface, and Worf tells Nikolai what happened with Vorin, and if he wants to come back, Picard will let him. Nikolai says that will ruin his whole plan.
And they loudly discuss all of this while everyone else is walking right by them.
Geordi says they'll reach the new planet in a few hours, and Worf says the holodeck malfunctions are increasing.
Later, one of the Baralans approaches Worf to talk to him about patching things up with Nikolai,
because they need Nikolai's strength now more than ever.
She wants Worf to consider himself part of their family, as she is going to have Nikolai's child.
The Enterprise reaches the planet, but Geordi says a holodeck won't last much longer.
And it'll be a few hours before they are ready to beam down the Baralans.
But then Picard says they might have to beam them down whether they're ready or not. So, okay, whatever.
Picard goes to talk to Vorin, who says he would like to go back to his people. He says he can't tell them the truth because they would either think he's crazy or have their worldview destroyed.
But if he doesn't tell them, he can't live with himself, knowing what he knows. Picard offers to let Vorin stay on the ship, but Vorin says he needs more time to think about it.
Worf yells at Nikolai for mating with a Baralan, but Nikolai says he's going to stay to raise the child, which Worf says isn't possible. They get into an even more heated argument, and they both go into this weird fighting stance, and I really wanted to see what they were going to do next, but they are interrupted by the holodeck going crazy.
Nikolai shoves everybody into tents, saying that Worf has the ability to stop the storms, and when everyone's in the tents, they transport everybody down to the planet.
And Geordi seems completely unconcerned about everything and looks like he's just having fun.
Yeah, he gets to play his own little video game up there. The storms stop, everybody comes out of their tent and is happy, and Worf says the storms will not return. But what about regular storms? If there's just a regular-ass thunderstorm, are the people going to start flipping out and being like, Worf lied to us?
Beverly and Picard discuss Vorin, who it turns out committed suicide. Beverly says he would have died anyway if they hadn't interfered, but Picard says he died alone and afraid.
And he acts like he's sad that Vorin is gone, saying he would have liked the chance to get to know him better, blah blah blah.
Which all sounded very hollow and out of place. And Beverly asks if he's sorry that he saved the Baralans, and he says of course not, even though his whole thing earlier was not violating the Prime Directive.
And on the planet, Worf reconciles with Nikolai, saying they both learned a valuable lesson, blah blah blah.
And Worf asks if he can take the chronicle that Vorin was keeping, and Nikolai says of course, both of them completely ignoring how important it seemed to be to the Baralans earlier. And Worf says he will tell their parents that Nikolai is happy.
Without that past, our future means nothing.
Homeward, overall.
This was a really weird episode, not so much for the plot as for the writing. It felt like it was written by an AI. The episode expects us to assume a lot of things about the Baralans without actually showing us anything to make those assumptions feel valid. For example, Vorin telling Picard that the Baralans couldn't take finding out the truth about what happened to them because it would destroy their worldview. We're supposed to sympathize with that and feel for him, but we don't even know what their worldview is. Every time we got a little glimpse of their culture, it felt very generic and stereotypical. It's like doing the opposite of show, don't tell. But where that usually applies to character traits, the problem here was factual information about the Baralans that we do not have. Characters throughout the episode kept saying things that contradicted what they had said earlier in the episode, or sometimes even in the same conversation. It felt like the writers were worried about getting the plot working, but they didn't think about how the characters were going to fit in, apart from Worf and Nikolai. The rest of them usually had generic fill-in-the-blank dialogue that sometimes may have seemed appropriate for the scene, but didn't make sense in the context of the episode as a whole, or things that they had said earlier in the episode. It was almost like each scene was written by a different person who only had a vague idea of what had come before.
And a vague idea of how to write.
The plot could have been interesting if the writing had felt like more than a rough draft, but there were so many strange errors that were constantly distracting from any potential character content, and none of the characters had believable arcs anyway. Worf and Nikolai making up at the end felt like it happened because it was the end of the episode, as opposed to feeling like it came about because of the actual events of the episode. If they had had someone else go over the script and point out all the weird dialogue moments that didn't make sense, they could have made this one passable at least, although I still think Worf and Nikolai could have used some work. The ideas were there, but as it is, the execution feels so disjointed and lacking of any depth that I'm going with a D+. It wasn't bad in an aggravating way, it was just very disappointing.
I disagree. I think it was bad in an aggravating way. So you thought I would not be as negative about this one.
Yeah.
But I am. I gave this one an F+. This was an incredibly by-the-numbers episode. First off, I think it's really weird that we're introducing all of these family members of main characters so late. Seems like a pretty massive crutch for the writers to generate some new interest. Maybe they should have stuck in the good ideas last season and wrapped everything up then. Who's next? Are we going to meet Picard's twin sisters? Beverly's Romulan cousin? The rest of Spot's litter? The writing is getting lazy. Even this whole conflict of the atmospheric dissolution or whatever was just, I don't know, let's say the planet's about to die all of a sudden for no reason and the good guys have to save it. Throw in some Prime Directive stuff too. Sending Worf down alone was only for the plot. Yes, it was dangerous on the planet, but so what? They run into dangerous stuff every week, and half the time Picard throws himself into it headfirst. The holodeck malfunctioning was dumb. Just knock the Boralans out and fix it. They even said it would only take a few hours. People sleep for a few hours. The fact that Nikolai even pulled the same trick on his own to get the Boralans there in the first place added to the obviousness and stupidity. And they can't just realign the quantum depolarization conduits to bypass the holodeck's damaged ionic dilithium housing. Come on! We seem to do a lot more with a lot less in a lot of episodes. But at least it wasn't as dumb as that time when Wesley said if the simulation shuts down, everyone inside will be erased.
Oh man, I forgot all about that.
Every decision that every character made in this episode didn't really make any sense, kind of what you said, and only served to add more conflicts to a story that really shouldn't have had that many. And then having Vorn kill himself at the end as a side throwaway thing felt very rushed and not thought out, and also from episodes that we've already seen. The character of Nikolai was interesting only because of his attitude and how it clashed with the rest of the cast. It was pretty amusing to just watch him do whatever he wanted, and for some reason nobody's stopping him from continuing to just keep doing it.
And only having Worf be the one to watch over him.
And every time he would make things worse and they would get mad, he would just go, what can you do? This episode just extracted and stitched together ideas from other episodes. The viewpoints were the same, the arguments were the same, and the resolution, that's in quotes, was the same. I think this type of episode is even worse than the ones that have potential but don't reach it. This is the kind of episode that has no purpose whatsoever, and is just people meeting a deadline without even trying.
No, I disagree. I feel like there was a kernel of an idea there. They just didn't really get it working.
But it was an idea we've already seen. Nothing was new in this episode.
They could have made it work, I think. They could have made a good episode if they had focused more on just Worf and Nikolai and made their relationship feel more real.
That's the only unique thing, is their relationship. Everything else in this episode was who watches the Watchers, the Defector, pen pals.
I don't know. I also like the idea of making the people think that the holodeck is a journey that they're taking. I like the ideas. I just don't think they made them work here, or really explored them to their potential.
Okay, I guess the holodeck thing was kind of interesting. They haven't done anything like that before?
I like the ideas. I just don't think they worked in the episode. You did convince me to change my grade, though. I think I'm going to go down to at least a D.
I mean, I don't know if that's appropriate for me to convince you to change your grade, because I'm not supposed to interfere. That's part of the Prime Directive.